Stop letting difficult people control your emotions. Because the truth is, the moment they do, they're no longer just difficult, they're in control. Think about the last time someone ruined your day without touching you, without shouting, without doing anything dramatic, just a comment, a look, a tone. Maybe it was a coworker who always criticizes indirectly, a family member who knows exactly which buttons to press, or someone who constantly plays the victim and leaves you feeling guilty for simply existing. What's disturbing isn't what they did, it's how long their energy stayed with you afterward. You replayed the conversation in your head, you imagined comebacks, you felt anger, frustration, maybe even shame. Hours later, they were probably calm, distracted, living their life, while you were still emotionally trapped in a moment that had already passed. That's the real cost of letting difficult people control your emotions. They occupy your mind rent-free. Here's something most people never stop to question. Why does one person's behavior have so much power over your internal state? The answer isn't flattering, but it's liberating, because it means you can change it. Difficult people don't control your emotions because they're strong. They control them because they trigger something unresolved inside you. It might be a need for approval, a fear of conflict, a habit of over-explaining yourself, or an old wound that reacts before logic has time to step in. These people don't create the reaction, they activate it. And once you see that, the situation changes completely. Imagine someone who constantly interrupts you or dismisses your opinions. One response is immediate irritation. Another is silent resentment. But there's a third option most people never consider: emotional detachment without coldness. Not suppressing feelings, not exploding, but choosing not to internalize what was never yours to carry. Difficult people thrive on reaction, confusion, anger, defensiveness. These are forms of engagement, and engagement is energy. When you give that energy away automatically, you train others on how to treat you, not through words, but through emotional access. This doesn't mean becoming passive, it means becoming precise. There's a powerful shift that happens when you stop asking, "Why are they like this?" and start asking, "Why am I reacting like this?" That question returns control to you. Because while you can't reprogram someone else's behavior, you can absolutely change how much influence it has over your inner world. Think of emotional control like a door. Right now, difficult people walk in unannounced. They rearrange the furniture in your mind. They leave a mess, and you clean it up afterward. Emotional maturity is learning to lock that door, not out of bitterness, but out of self-respect. This is especially hard with people close to you, family, partners, colleagues you can't avoid. The mistake many people make is believing boundaries require confrontation. They don't. The most effective boundaries are internal. They're decided long before the interaction happens. For example, deciding, "I don't need to prove myself to be valid," or "Not every comment deserves a response," or "Someone else's emotional chaos is not my responsibility." These aren't affirmations, they're rules of engagement. If this resonates so far, take a moment to support the channel, subscribe, and leave a like. It helps keep conversations like this alive for people who desperately need them but don't yet have the words. Here's another uncomfortable truth. Difficult people often sense emotional availability the way predators sense weakness, not maliciously, but instinctively. They test, they push, and when they find a reaction, they repeat the behavior. When there's no emotional payoff, the dynamic changes. This doesn't mean they suddenly become kind, it means they lose leverage. And losing leverage is where your freedom begins. One of the biggest traps people fall into with difficult individuals is believing that understanding them will stop the damage. You analyze their childhood, their trauma, their stress, their personality type, and while empathy is valuable, over-empathy without boundaries turns into self-abandonment. You end up carrying emotional weight that was never yours to begin with. There's a difference between compassion and absorption. Compassion says, "I see your pain." Absorption says, "I'll let your pain become mine." Difficult people often blur that line, especially with those who are emotionally aware, kind, or conflict avoidant. They vent, they complain, they provoke, and slowly, without realizing it, you become their emotional dumping ground. Have you ever left a conversation feeling inexplicably drained even though nothing bad happened? No argument, no insult, just exhaustion. That's a sign your emotional boundaries were crossed, not physically, not verbally, but energetically. You listened without protection, you absorbed without filtering. Here's the shift that changes everything. You are allowed to observe without absorbing. You can hear words without letting them land. You can acknowledge someone's emotion without taking responsibility for regulating it. This takes practice because most of us were conditioned to respond emotionally first and think later. When someone is passive-aggressive, we tense up. When someone criticizes us, we defend. When someone is cold, we chase clarity. These reactions feel automatic, but they're learned patterns, and anything learned can be unlearned. A practical example. Imagine a coworker who constantly undermines you in meetings. The old pattern is internal rage or immediate defensiveness. The new pattern is neutrality paired with clarity. Short responses, no over-explaining, no emotional leakage. You don't withdraw, you stabilize, and that stability sends a clear message without confrontation. You don't get access to my emotional state. Another example. A family member who thrives on provoking guilt. They make comments that imply you're selfish, ungrateful, or distant. The reflex is to justify yourself, to explain your intentions, but justification is a form of surrender. It hands them the power to judge your inner world. Emotional freedom begins when you realize you don't owe everyone an explanation, especially not people committed to misunderstanding you. This doesn't mean becoming cold or dismissive, it means becoming grounded. Grounded people don't react quickly, they pause, and that pause is everything. Because in that pause, you choose your response instead of donating it. Here's a subtle but powerful rule. If someone consistently brings chaos, confusion, or emotional pressure into your life, the solution is rarely to engage better. It's to engage less. Less emotional investment, less expectation, less exposure. You don't have to cut people off to stop letting them control you. Sometimes all it takes is lowering the volume at which they exist in your life. And yes, at first this can feel uncomfortable, even lonely, especially if you're used to being the understanding one, the strong one, the one who keeps the peace. When you stop emotionally over-functioning, some people will feel the loss, and they may push harder. That's not a sign you're doing something wrong. It's a sign the dynamic is changing. If you're finding value in this is a good moment to pause and support the channel. Leave a like and subscribe. It helps this message reach people who are quietly struggling with emotional exhaustion and don't yet know why. Here's the deeper truth. Difficult people don't steal your peace. You give it away. Usually in small, unconscious moments, a reaction here, a rumination there, a need to be understood. But peace can be reclaimed the same way it was lost, gradually, intentionally, and internally. You don't win by changing them. You win by no longer being controlled by what they do. The final step is the one most people get wrong. They learn how to detach from difficult people, but in the process, they harden. They become guarded, distant, cynical. That's not emotional freedom, that's emotional armor. And armor protects, yes, but it also isolates. True emotional mastery isn't about shutting down, it's about staying open without being invaded. The goal is not to stop feeling. The goal is to stop being hijacked. When you no longer let difficult people control your emotions, you don't become indifferent to life. You become selective with your attention. You stop giving front row access to people who haven't earned it. And that selectivity creates calm, not emptiness. Think about someone you respect deeply, someone grounded, calm, unshakable. They're not reactive. They don't explain themselves unnecessarily. They don't absorb chaos. Yet they're not cold. They're present. That's the state you're moving toward. One of the clearest signs you're making progress is this: situations that used to trigger intense reactions now feel quieter. Not because you're suppressing emotion, but because the emotion doesn't hook as deeply anymore. The same comment that once ruined your mood now passes through you without sticking. That's not weakness, that's regulation. Another key shift happens internally. You stop rehearsing conversations in your head. You stop needing closure from people who are incapable of giving it. You stop waiting for apologies that may never come. And in that space, something powerful grows: self-trust. You begin to trust that even if someone disapproves, misunderstands, or reacts poorly, you will be okay. You don't need to control their response to feel safe. That's freedom. This is especially important to remember. Difficult people don't change when you explain yourself better. They change when their access to your emotional energy disappears. Or they don't change at all, and you still win. Because your peace was never supposed to be negotiated. There will be moments when you slip, when someone gets under your skin again. That doesn't erase your progress. Emotional mastery isn't perfection, it's recovery speed. How quickly you return to yourself after being pulled off balance. And each time you do, you reinforce a new identity, someone who responds instead of reacts. Someone who chooses calm without sacrificing authenticity. Someone who can stand firm without becoming hard. If this message has helped you reframe how you deal with difficult people, take a moment now to support the channel. Subscribe, leave a like, and share this with someone who might need it. You never know who's quietly carrying emotional weight that doesn't belong to them. Remember this: you don't need to change who you are to protect your peace. You only need to stop giving people access they've proven they don't know how to handle. Let difficult people be difficult. You don't have to be affected.